This is a review of the Nikon FM, a camera which was made between 1977 to 1982 and featured a mechanical shutter and 60-40 meter.
I'm going to go over the controls of the camera, then I'm going to talk about my likes and dislikes, a little bit about my history with the camera, and then I'm going to show some pictures that I've taken through the years.
Taking a look at the top plate right side, you're going to find the film advance lever, which also functions as a meter on-off switch. After that, you see the frame counter window, the shutter release, the shutter speed dial, and finally the multiple exposure lever. It's also worth noting that while this looks like a button, it's actually a lever that you push toward the center of the camera while rotating the film advance lever. In that case, the film is not advanced, but the shutter is cocked. You will also notice that the shutter speed dial is where you set the film speed. Moving back up to the shutter release on this camera, you will see a gnarled finger guard, indicating that this is an early FM. There are two indicators on the finger guard, one black and one red. The black indicates normal frame advance operation. Red is the setting you choose when using a motor drive. In the red position, the shutter release button is locked out, so it can be used that way as well. It is also worth noting that these early FMs didn't use the frame advance lever as a shutter lockout, meaning you can fire the shutter when the lever is against the body. The lever is the meter on switch though. On the top plate left side, you're going to find the rewind lever, and on top the pen prism, the hot shoe, which does not have contacts for a TTL flash. Moving to the front plate right side, you're going to find the self-timer lever, and beside that, the depth of field preview lever. Moving to the left side, you're going to find the lens release button and the flash synchronization terminal, as well as the AI indexing release lever. Looking at the back plate, there's a note holder and an FM indicator preceding the serial number, denoting that this is an FM model. Looking at the bottom plate from left to right, you're going to find the motor drive coupler, the film rewind button, the tripod socket, and finally the battery cover. Looking into the viewfinder, you're going to find the focusing screen straight ahead, the aperture window on top of that, and the shutter speed indicator on the left. The metering is weighted 60% everything inside the biggest circle and 40% everything outside the biggest circle. The exposure information is indicated on the right side of the frame by a plus, a 0, and a minus sign. A red LED is lit up in the center by the 0 to indicate proper exposure. If two LEDs are lit up, one by the plus sign and one by the 0 sign, that indicates 1/5 to 1 stop over exposure. And two lights lit on the negative side indicate 1/5 stop to 1 stop under exposure. And one LED lit either on the positive or the negative indicate over 1 stop over or under exposed.
Now I'm going to talk about the things I really love about this camera. The first is that the shutter is fully mechanical, meaning that if the batteries die in the camera, the only thing that would quit working is the meter. And you could use an external meter and every shutter speed on the dial would still work. One of the options you could do is you could download an app on your iPhone or Android that would tell you what the proper exposure would be for your given speed film, and the camera would just keep on working. A second thing is that this camera is the same basic body as the FA, the FE2, the FE, and the FM2. It's a very solid body. There's nothing plastic on it. It's very sturdy and very reliable. This camera was used as a backup for pro-level cameras, if you believe the camera magazines from the 80s. Another thing I really love about this camera is you can use non-AI lenses or non-auto indexing lenses on this camera. Those are lenses made before like 1977. They're really inexpensive to buy on Craigslist or eBay, and they're great lenses, manual focus of course, but they will mount on this camera without breaking it. The original FE and the original FM, you could mount that in because of a special tab on the camera that could fold up and out of the way so it wouldn't get broken. Another thing I love about the camera is the very simple interface on the camera. It doesn't have anything automatic. There's no there's no auto. For every picture you take, you have to pick the shutter speed and you have to pick the aperture. So it keeps the camera interface very simple, and it's a great camera to learn on. It's also very sturdy. Another thing is there's no shutter lockout on the Film Advance lever, meaning that you do have to pull out the lever to activate the meter, and then you meter the scene, which basically tells you the shutter speed and aperture you can use to take the picture. But then you can kick this back in, put it right up to your face without poking yourself in the eye if you're using the other eye, and then you can take the picture. And you can see that it works just fine. Now I'm going to talk about some of the things I don't necessarily love about this camera. The first is the top shutter speed on it is 1/1000th of a second. And if you bought an FM2, you would get 2 more stops, or 1/4000th of a second. Why is that important? Because that gives you a wider range of apertures you can use, because the apertures and the shutter speeds work together to let the proper amount of light into the camera. Probably go over a whole video on how that works. Another thing is this camera does not have TTL flash. TTL flash is great because it reads the amount of light off the film surface, and so your flash exposures are very accurate. So you'd have to move up to like an FE or an FE2 to get to that, or an FA. And you can tell because there's only one contact on the hot shoe.
This is the process for unmounting an AI lens and mounting up a non-AI lens. The first thing you've got to do is push a little button that's right beside the lever there, and then with the other finger you can push that little lever back and out of the way. Then you just mount the lens on just like you would normally, just making sure that tab's out of the way so you don't bend or break it. Here's a short clip on how to use the multiple exposure lever. I'm showing here that when you advance the film with the Film Advance lever, you can see it advancing in the window, but if you push the multiple exposure lever to the left and then you advance the film, or rather turn the crank, it does not advance the film in the window.
The 80s were an incredible time to be a budding photographer. Camera manufacturers were coming out with 35mm models every couple months, and the photography magazines were eating them up. Manufacturers like Canon, Nikon, Minolta, Olympus, and Pentax were adding electronics to the film exposure, the flash, the Film Advance, and autofocus. So I read all those photography magazines from the early to mid 80s about all the new cameras that were coming out from the manufacturers. And I was really drawn to the Nikons because Nikon seemed to have the lion's share of the pro market with the F, F2, and then the F3. I couldn't afford the pro level cameras, and truthfully I couldn't afford these, what they called advanced amateur or something cameras, but I could dream about owning them. So I read all the specs on the FM, the FM2, the FE, the FE2, and the FA. And these were the cameras I always wanted to own. Back then, of course, too expensive. So nowadays you can find these cameras really inexpensively on the internet, on eBay or on Craigslist. You know, a good example of this FM with the lens oftentimes for $100 to $120. The FE2, I've seen them on eBay for the same, 100, 150, for good examples, good working examples. And this FA I bought off Craigslist. I think I paid maybe $85 for it. and I think it was even with this lens. This is a 35 to 72.8, and this is a great camera. I'm going to do a review of this camera next, so subscribe if you want to catch that one. But these are just great cameras. They're great shooting cameras. They're great cameras to own because I think they're beautiful. You know, the design, the shape, the sturdiness, and they just go and go and go. Initially, photographers were afraid of all the automation, like the shutter speed, you know, being controlled by the computer. You know, something goes wrong, then the camera doesn't work anymore. And I think that might be one of the reasons a lot of people were drawn to the FM, you know, being a fully mechanical shutter. This thing should last forever, right? Because there's just springs and gears in there and levers. But I've never had a problem with either of the other two cameras. So even my 8008 still shooting fine, and the Minolta X700. So I don't know. These are metal though. They just feel a little more special than some of the other cameras, and I think they're just beautiful. So
Here are just a couple pictures I've taken with the camera over the years. First up, we have a concrete lion from somewhere in either Virginia or Maryland. Next up is some foliage from early spring. And then we have the horse picture, which I really like, how the fence goes away in the background. And finally, it's a lighthouse in North Carolina, Outer Banks.
if you like my video, hit the like button and think about subscribing. Also, leave me a note in the comments with other cameras you'd like me to review. Thanks! I'm going to go over the external reviews. Oh, God damn it. If you buy the FM2, you get, what, 3 more stops. You get 1/4,000th of a second. 2 more stops. 2, 4, yes, 2 more stops. Okay, we'll do that one over. What I love about this camera is the flash sync. The flash synchronization speed is 1/150th. Shit. The next thing I don't. This is an FM, and the FA. Damn it, it's not the FA. And the FE. And Nikon exposure, flash, motor drive,